Okay, I wanted to make a video today. I want to talk a little bit about the two witnesses and a few things that I feel like people aren't grasping exactly correctly about the scripture involved here. Um, I'm going to read a few passages from Revelation chapter 11 and the first book of Peter chapter 2 and try and explain why I feel like people may not understand how the details of this is actually going to play out. Um, I'm going to start by reading a portion of Revelation chapter 11 directly from the scripture. Then I was given a measuring rod like a staff, and I was told, "Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and those who worship there. But do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave that out, for it is given over to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months. And I will grant authority to my two witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the Lord of the earth. If anyone would harm them, fire pours from their mouth and devours their enemies. If anyone consumes their foes," it's written two different ways, sorry. "If anyone would harm them, this is how they are doomed to be killed. They have the power to shut the sky, that no rain may fall during the days of their prophesying. And they have power over waters to turn them to blood, and to strike the earth with every kind of plague as often as they desire. And when they have finished their testimony, the beast that rises from the bottomless pit will make war on them and conquer them and kill them. And their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city that symbolically is known as Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. For 3.5 days, some from the people and tribes and languages will gaze at their dead bodies and refuse to let them be placed in a tomb. And those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them and make merry and exchange presents, because these two prophets had been a torment to those who dwell on the earth. But after 3.5 days, a breath of life from God entered them, and they stood up on their feet, and great fear fell upon those who saw them. Then it goes on to speak of them ascending to heaven in a cloud and beginning the time known as the wrath of God. I'm also going to read this portion of the first book of Peter, chapter 2, and then I'm going to make the connections between the two passages for you to understand. So put away all malice and all deceit and hypocrisy and envy and all slander. Like newborn infants, long for the pure spiritual milk, that by it you may grow up into salvation, if indeed you have tasted the Lord is good. As you come to him, a living stone rejected by men, but in the sight of God, chosen and precious, you yourselves are being built up as a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. For it stands in Scripture, "Behold, I am laying in Zion a stone, a cornerstone chosen and precious, and whoever believes in him will not be put to shame." So the honor is for you who believe, but for those who do not believe, the stone that the builders have rejected has become the cornerstone, and a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. They stumble because they disobey the word, as they were destined to do. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of the darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's chosen people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Okay, now I'm going to try and make some demonstrations of what I'm trying to really say between these two passages. You can see that in Revelation it mentions them having one mouth, not plural. Revelation chapter 11. This is how the Bible drops subtle clues for you to understand the nature of this prophecy. This is demonstrating they are of one flesh, similar to how a husband and wife become one flesh through marriage. But in the first book of Peter chapter 2, it speaks about the cornerstone, which we assuredly know is Jesus Christ. It then goes on to say, they stumbled because they disobeyed the word, as they were destined to do. They, as in plural. This reinforces the multiplicity of the cornerstone, that he is multifaceted, and he has the two witnesses intertwined as one flesh, the flesh of Jesus Christ. After all, Jesus Christ specifically tells you that he will grant authority to his two witnesses. Therefore, Jesus Christ is literally putting them on equal ground with himself as God. You can see the exact same occurrences in the first crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ will occur again in the exact same manner during the second coming, all except one thing. The fact that their bodies will not be allowed to be put in a tomb or buried. This is so the whole world will witness the resurrection. This time, for all the unbelievers that do not believe in the prophecy of Jesus Christ in his first coming. Other than that, they will lie dead in the street for 3.5 days. The world will gaze upon them, and then a breath of life of God will enter them, and they will stand on their feet. After rising to heaven in a cloud, there will be a great earthquake similar to the first crucifixion of Jesus. The two witnesses and Jesus Christ are inseparable. I have also heard people trying to claim that the two witnesses are Archangel Michael and Archangel Gabriel. As well as many claim they believe the two witnesses are Elijah and Moses. In my opinion, this is not an accurate interpretation of Scripture. In my opinion, as the Bible clearly tells us, not to worship angels and not to worship prophets. These two angels, as well as these two prophets, were servants of Jesus Christ without a doubt, but we are not to ever worship them as if they are Jesus Christ. This has to be understood. I would not disagree that the two witnesses do come in the spirit of Elijah and Moses, and in the spirit of the two archangels mentioned, but we are to stay focused on Jesus Christ as the bridge to salvation, not angels or prophets. Sacrifices to the living God are made acceptable through Jesus Christ. You have to pay attention to the subtle hints left for you to be able to understand Scripture correctly, or at least to not misinterpret it and wind up misrepresenting it to other disciples.